This week, the agenda checked in with economist Don Drummond on the state of Ontario's economy, took a second look at the popularity of consumer DNA testing, surveyed what reform looks like in Saudi Arabia, and reassessed liberal democracy's prospects with economist Thembisa Moyo. The agenda's Week in Review now starts with a collaboration that brings together Indigenous knowledge and NASA data to help deal with climate change. What kind of work are you going to be doing with NASA as it relates specifically to climate change?
So the geospatial data offers real-time satellite imagery so that you can look at land use planning, climate change adaptation mitigation. You can look at water use, disaster risk reduction. And so it's looking at the needs of Indigenous communities and the sort of the gaps in data that Indigenous communities have. Because while the software is open source, the actual interpretation of the images requires some training. And so we're going to be meeting with Native American communities on the Red Cliff Reservation.
Where's that?
That's in Wisconsin. Okay. So I'm heading there in a couple of weeks, and we're going to be talking to them about their needs. And so, for example, the Navajo Nation looks at water and has drought issues. And so hydrologists work with NASA, Navajo hydrologists work with NASA. Another example here is in the north, caribou migration, reindeer herders up in the Arctic have worked with NASA and brought together their understanding of permafrost thaw and different things that are happening because they're experiencing global temperature rising twice as fast as we are in the south. And so they're having to look at adaptation strategies, particularly because that's their food source and a really huge part of their culture are, reindeer or caribou herders, for example.
What kind of, if any, pushback have you had from sort of official science to what you're trying to achieve here?
Yeah, I think if you're challenging the status quo, you're bound to receive some pushback, and often it happens at more of a personal level than an institutional level when you challenge the identity and core of a scientist who's not used to speaking about spirituality, spirit helpers, metaphysical things. Indigenous communities, for example, had a lot of knowledge that came from cosmology, and that's reflected in the fact we have 13 moons and we don't call the months like January, February, we name them by what's happening in the seasons. And so scientists often are finding that they're not the only experts in the room, and so sometimes that's, I think it's a little bit of discomfort. It's destabilizing, when your core identity is something that it's not necessarily being challenged, but it certainly requires some humility to understand there are multiple worldviews and viewpoints.
You are introducing some rather new ideas for the folks on this one.
Yeah, for sure.
But at the end of the day, I presume that you think will be better for the collaboration, and I wonder what that looks like.
Yeah, so, there was a push, I think, in ecology to integrate these knowledges. And I don't really think it's about integration. I think it's actually about what we call ethical space. Willie Ermine talked about ethical space. If you and I are sitting here talking about really distinct worldviews, the space in between us needs to be safe, fair, where I don't put down your ideas and you don't put down mine. But we have this discussion, and we actually try to integrate them. So it's actually about maybe braiding sweetgrass. It's about braiding these ideas together and going back and forth, recognizing that they're both equally valid and have something to contribute, and they're going to give us a more holistic picture. If you just completely ignored, one, either science or traditional Indigenous knowledge, that you would not get a complete picture, and therefore what you're trying to do, make decisions or find solutions to problems, you're going to miss the opportunity because those insights might be in that other worldview.
We've accepted this principle, thou shalt run balanced budgets. Well, you can't just say that because it depends on your debt level is. If you have too high a debt level, you actually have to run budget surpluses, and that's the circumstance Ontario is. The goal is not to preserve the balanced budget of the last year, is actually you have to run surpluses for a while. So we're going in the opposite direction.
You made 366 recommendations 6 years ago with your task force. And I'm wondering, have you kept score, and do you know what percentage has been implemented?
Well, I had an interesting experience. It was a couple of years ago. I was shown a spreadsheet, and it had all the 366. It was a leap year, so there was one per day. That's why it wasn't 365. And it had categorically rejected, generally accepted, status today, and if it hadn't been implemented, what the impediments were. When I was presented this, it had 70% of the 366 had been implemented. And I was kind of surprised because I guarantee this, if we go outside of the studio right now and ask people in the street, they will probably say virtually none of them. That seems to be the popular perception. And people who are well informed in these kind of areas seem to think that. And so I was skeptical. So I had a while to look at this thing, and I tried to be critical of it. I wore a critical eye, and I said, man, they're probably exaggerating here and there. And actually I found there were some cases where they hadn't counted things that they'd actually done. So I had like scope of practice in healthcare. Well, pharmacists can do vaccines right now. Well, that's scope of practice. And you know, it's not everything I had in mind, but at least a faint tick could be beside that. So I actually thought maybe it was a little bit higher than the 70%. Unfortunately, they kind of lost interest, so I think they did quite a bit of it. But I'll come back to what I said before. So grosso modo, they followed the overall spending pattern. They just didn't do some of the underlying reforms. And that's unfortunate because you can squeeze anything for a while just by squeezing it, but if you don't actually do the underlying reforms...
So give us an example. What's an underlying reform they should have done?
It was just going further. So in healthcare is actually one of the areas where they have done some reforms, but not all of them. So we still have over 10% of the people in hospitals or what we call alternative levels of care that shouldn't be in the hospital at all. They tend to be in hospitals longer than they need to do. We still don't have complete coordination of care. We don't have enough long-term care facilities, but a lot of the people that are going to go into long-term care facilities should be in a home-based environment, and there are initiatives, but that's not very fulsome.
Well, but the government's view is people need care. They need dental care, they need child care, they need home care, they need pharma care, they need all these different kinds of care. And according to the government of the day anyway, people are clamoring for the government to go into deficit to pay for these things. So are they wrong to do that?
Well, first of all, let's just talk about fairness before we talk right and wrong, because that's what the public debt comes about. So you're saying that we here sitting today should build up debt and somebody else, maybe us later in our life, but maybe our children, even our children should pay for that. Is that fair? I'd say not. You could argue if we have a debt burden of this 37% and we're passing on capital assets, government buildings and airports and roads equivalent to 37%, fair enough, right? We're going to give our children $1 of debt, but we're giving them $1 of asset they can work with. But that's not what we're doing. We're giving them far less assets than we are. So there's an intergenerational aspect of it. It is unfair. Is it okay? Well, it is future taxation. And you know, you're probably going to go here, but I'll put it on the table right now. 25% reduction in electricity prices, maybe another 12% on top of that. Where's that going to come from? Well, it's coming from somebody in the future. It's not coming off a tree.
One of the great things that came out of finishing the Human Genome Project in the early 2000s, and we heard people say this is shown that we're all biologically the same, race is a biological fiction. And then what's happened since then is there's been this increasing interest in variation, right? Population variation, and it's re-invited the idea that there are these meaningful differences in the races. And what research has shown, it's hard to study this well, is talking about difference in biological terms does increase the likelihood of racist attitudes. And there's been some very interesting research to show that. So yeah, it's problematic, and it's problematic scientifically, and it can be problematic also on a social level.
Deborah, how concerned are you that this science will be used to embellish racist arguments that, sad to say, are actually quite timely right now and seem to be in bloom all over the world?
I think that is a legitimate concern to have, but at the same time, I think the science should be able to speak for itself, and the efforts that we have to fight racism should be going towards calling out the people who are using these findings or biological markers as justifications for their nasty ideas. I don't think acknowledging that we're different necessarily leads to those ideas.
Well, let's understand this a little better. We clearly understand what the potential downside is of exploiting this information. What do you see as the benefits of researching genetic differences among groups?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, there is a difference in terms of medical condition predisposition among the races. So if
you want to know if you get Tay-Sachs, or you want to know if this kind of thing.
Prostate cancer, there's a higher risk in African American men than European men. Same with multiple sclerosis, the risk is higher in Europeans than African Americans. So it's not appropriate to take one racial group and generalize from them to all others. And also there needs to be more research done looking at how different people of different ethnic backgrounds or races respond to different medications, and that research won't get done if we go forward with the idea that everybody's the same.
Part of the trick here is that I gather there's one study that suggests less than 5% of genetic variation is due to group differences. How do we know if 5% is a lot or a little?
Well, you know, and I actually agree with Deborah. We don't want to stop the research, right? We want to. I'm concerned about how that we talk about that research and how it's represented. And when we are all so genetically similar, and we are, that 5% means a lot, right? Like it's 0.5%. It means a lot, right? So when there is variation, it can be significant, right? Even look at something like lactose intolerance, where it's more common in Asian populations, but it's not exclusive to, right? That's not there's not some boundary that says this social construct of race has these genetic characteristics. Another good example is sickle cell anemia, right? We all often think of that as a trait that African Americans have, but it's not African Americans. It's populations that are exposed to malaria, and so there are other populations that we don't traditionally think of as Black or African American that also have this trait. So there aren't these bounds.
So we're wrong to think of that as the quote unquote Black person's disease.
Exactly right. It's not exclusive to that population. So. I think that this idea that there are these discrete populations can have social consequences.
Studies have shown that humans share 99% of DNA with chimps. Is there a fear that small differences will not be insignificant? What do you think?
I agree that, well, regardless of what the percentage is, we should be able to talk about differences freely and not have to worry about that being used as some way to justify some sort of bad intentions. So regardless of whether the percentage was larger or smaller, these differences exist. And so ultimately, I think that's what the conversation should be about, as opposed to pretending that or trying to minimize what the differences are.
We know 9/11, 2001, has its genesis in Saudi Arabia. And I wonder whether you think MBS's efforts at reform will go deeply enough to try to get to the bottom of that and root out the evil there.
Well, I mean, definitely he has staked out a position being very critical of the kind of ultra-conservative version of Wahhabism that predominated in the decades leading up to 9/11 and since then. And he says he wants to go back to, he dates it from 1979. In other words, he's pegging it to the Iranian Revolution. Actually goes back a bit further than that, to say the least. But he is, I mean, it's actually quite a good way of selling it to the public. It's a smart thing to say, even if it's not historically that accurate. So he's committed to trying to change the way the government and public largesse pushes people towards more tolerant, less extreme versions of Islam, or the other way around. And so you're already seeing a pattern of defunding extreme mosques and other institutions overseas. And I think over time, it will definitely have an impact. I think over time, it had a very negative impact. There's the Saudi government's support of intolerant and extreme fundamentalist views. And I think if they change that, it will have a big effect, but it's going to take a while.
Esma, your view on the 9/11 angle?
Well, more on this idea of the Wahhabi angle, and as I'm sure Hussein knows, in his interview, in MBS's interview with The Atlantic's editor Jeffrey Goldberg, he actually said there's no such thing as Wahhabism, which I thought was such a unbelievable statement, because indeed, I think for many who watch the region, the most intolerant, the most, frankly, obscure interpretation of Islam often came from Saudi Arabia. It was like no other. And the fact that they were putting millions of dollars behind it and propagating it across everywhere from Europe to very liberal societies like Bosnia, all the way to Indonesia and Malaysia, was very problematic. We were getting a Wahhabi version of Islam being propagated across the world with a lot of money backing it. And that is enormous. I think what's important here is not only is there a lack of recognition that, frankly, this is an intolerant view of Islam that is frankly, not applicable to 99% of Muslims. It's a very, very, strict interpretation. I call it sort of the Amish version of Christianity.
But it has
very
been
specific,
the
right?
foundation of Saudi Arabia,
But
though.
it's the foundation of Saudi Arabia, and they've put millions and billions of dollars behind it by building mosques, schools across the world to the detriment of, frankly, most Muslims out there. So there's something very problematic about that. And I'm afraid, from everything that I've seen from MBS, he does not acknowledge or recognize how damaging that is and how alien that particular interpretation of Islam, that Wahhabi interpretation, which is frankly a shade of gray away from ISIS philosophy, in my opinion, in terms of the basic principles of it, how detrimental that was to the entire philosophy of Islam. So I think this is really the challenge. And I just recently saw that they've just poured millions of more dollars into Bangladesh. No, thank you. I think what the Saudis need to do is acknowledge that they have been a source of not helping the Muslim world, but actually not helping them at all, and they need to really pull back and fund schools, fund community centers, fund parks, for God's sakes. Enough with your particular interpretation, because it's not welcomed and it's alien in the vast majority of the Muslim world.
Let me just push back on that a little bit, because I don't actually disagree with any of that. But let's say you accept that, right, and agree with it, and I think it's largely true. And you are MBS, and you say, right, we don't like this extreme version, we don't like this intolerance, we see it's a threat. What politically would be the smart thing to do? Would it be to get into a protracted argument with your public about what is Wahhabism or not Wahhabism and what is Islam or not, or just to say this is what we want and start pushing for that and funding that? So intellectually and historically, it's dishonest to say there's no Wahhabism, but politically, it's actually very smart.
What are the obvious signs that you're seeing that we are, as you say, at the edge of chaos?
So I would say that from an economic perspective, we have a whole host of long-term economic headwinds. Many of us are very familiar with them. Demographic shifts, the issues around healthcare and pension costs that are mounting, concerns around technology and the jobless underclass, what that might mean for higher unemployment in years to come, issues around income inequality, the debt burden, productivity declines, worries about natural resource scarcity. This is a whole confluence of economic challenges that economists are deeply worried about, but these are long-term intergenerational challenges that unfortunately are mismatched with the short-termism and the myopia that we see in policymaking and politicians, particularly in liberal democracies where the election process is so frequent.
More on that in a moment. Economic growth and our sort of inability to do much better than 1, 2, 2.5%, 3% over the last many, many years. Where would you put that on the list of problems today?
It's number one, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, of course, I'm tainted as an economist, but I think it's critical for people to understand that in order for us to double per capita incomes in one generation, we need the world economies to be growing at 7% a year. 7% a year. This is just mathematics. The critical problem with this is many of the emerging countries, and as you know, 90% of the world's population lives in the emerging markets. Those countries are growing far below that 7% target. Many of them are just coming out of a recession. You have countries growing at around 1 or 2%, such as Russia or Brazil, South Africa, etc. These are countries that have over 50 million people, and these populations are growing rapidly in many places in the world where we're simply not able to create the growth that is necessary.
Give us the economics 101 here. If we somehow managed not to have 2.5% economic growth annually, but 7%, what would that mean to the planet?
Well, first of all, it's a mismatch in expectations. People want to live like the average Canadian. They want to have a great home. They want their kids to have access to fantastic schools. And of course, they want to have amazing infrastructure and healthcare. But in a world where we are seeing not only economic growth slow, but in many places contraction of economic opportunities, this is a real problem in terms of jobs, it's in terms of living standards, and ultimately in terms of prospects for human progress.
Let me give you the flip side of the argument. You tell me why I'm wrong.
Yes.
Massive economic growth can also lead to very high inflation, very high interest rates, overconsumption of natural resources, overpopulation, potentially more climate change as well. Is that not something to be feared with too much economic growth?
I wouldn't say feared. I think what we're suggesting is that we have to manage these processes. And actually, the public policy dialogue globally has already, in many respects, tried to adapt to that. I'm not saying we're at the place we need to be, but certainly in discussions around green growth and the need to create livelihoods and improve people's living standards, but with recognition and acknowledgement of the climate change implications, I think that debate and discourse is incredibly important and is actually happening. Nowhere near where it needs to be. Obviously, this is something that has to be on a global agenda. But I think that it's definitely brought into the discussion to a point that I think is important.
What do you think are the prime things holding back more robust growth rates?
Well, for me, currently, I think that the political system in liberal democracies, which are the leading economies, I do think is hampering the debate. By that, I mean a lot of the challenges that we're experiencing in the global economy today that I mentioned earlier are long-term, and they require pragmatic choices, but also choices where there are some sacrifices to be made and trade-offs to be made between today's generations and future generations. But politicians very naturally court and cater to today's politicians because they want to be re-elected. That is the nature of the democratic process. And I'm arguing in this book that it is to the detriment of the global economy and ultimately to better livelihoods. But I am also offering a suite of solutions to actually bridge this.
And that is the Agenda's Week in Review for this Friday, May the 4th, 2018. May the 4th be with you, everybody. Happy Star Wars Day. You can see all of those conversations in their entirety at tvo.org, on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/theagenda, and on our Twitter feed, that's twitter.com/theagenda.
The Agenda with Steve Bacon is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario, helping businesses stay on the right side of change with strategic thinking, insightful decisions, and business leadership. Are you on the right side of change? Ask an Ontario CPA.